My name is Kilian Gericke. I'm professor of product development at University of Rostock, that's in the north of Germany. And together with Claudia Eckert, I'm one of the chairs of this special interest group. And I will start sharing my screen and try to give a short introduction what we aim to do today. So the title for this workshop today of the special interest group on design processes is Changing Paradigms for Managing Product Development Processes. I hope you all have seen the announcement for this workshop, but give me a second while Lisa is asked or is giving the hint that everybody needs to send a request to participate. I would like to check if everyone in the room is able to see and hear me before I continue. That's not entirely clear to me. I think there are a couple of people attending, but I have no clarity if all of them can see and hear. Mark, do you know that?
They should be able to see and hear you, but if they want to talk, they need to request it in the top right of their screen.
Okay. So I think we all have to familiarize with the hop-in tool. I think it's pretty straightforward. We are able to share our screens. Later today, we will use a Miro board embedded on the screen. And if you want to respond to what I say and what I ask you, you have to request permission on the top right of the screen so that we can grant you the rights to become active. So I'm professor of product development in Germany. My research interest is pretty broad, but it centers around questions related to design methodology. And for me, that is why this touches upon design methods and the use, development, evaluation of design methods. It's also tied linked to design approaches. So how do we actually organize design processes? How can we manage design processes? And this is what one of the core topics of this special interest group is about. And before also Claudia will introduce herself as the second chair of this special interest group, I would like to give a short overview about this workshop today that you can check for your expectations if that matches. In the beginning, I will give a short introduction to this special interest group, what's the general focus, how do we work, and we introduce ourselves. We thought it would be extremely valuable, as we cannot meet in person, that all participants give a short introduction to introduce themselves, give a short hint who you are, where you're from, what's your main interest. And we blocked quite a substantial amount of time because for this special interest group, the networking is quite a central part. Usually design and ISO conferences are the main means for us to attract new members, to identify core topics, core issues, and this is just usually just the beginning for subsequent meetings, for subsequent activities. So therefore, we think it's extremely important to have that time that everybody becomes visible and that we understand what your interest is. Then we will start focusing up on the topic today. And we will start that having 4 keynote presentations. We hope that these keynote presentations, which were given by Lisa Rösler, she's a PhD student at my university here in Rostock. Then Dr. Sabine Muschig she's working for Trumpf in Germany. Dr. Alexander Atzberger working at Webasto, and Dr. Udo Kannengießer, who's working at Johannes Kepler University in Linz, Austria. On a parallel chat, I see that there might be some technical issues with the app. Is that resolved now, or?
I'm sorry, where are you seeing issues?
Claudia Eckert seems to have some problems. And I just need to verify if she is online or not.
Okay, give me 1 second, please.
I don't see her as... she is online in the list of participants. But it seems that we cannot understand her, but she can hear us. So Claudia, please activate or request permission to share audio and video. It must be on the top right on the hop-in screen.
She contacted me in a private message. We're getting it sorted now.
Okay. She will introduce herself once we are ready. So the special interest group, the process special interest group, what are our main topics? We started from, our origins are quite old. So the special interest group was founded as one of the first special interest groups, and it was the Modeling and Management of Engineering Processes, SIG, so MMEP. And topic-wise, we are quite close to that. So we have a broad interest in approaches for and challenges for managing and modeling all kinds of processes in product development and in engineering in the broadest sense. And we aim to advance the field. We aim to tackle particular challenges that we consider as relevant at the moment and where it is beneficial for SIG members to have an active platform for exchange. And from that part, we developed our interest and addressed more detailed elements. We had a particular focus over the last 2 years on modeling approaches. So how can we select and recommend best suitable modeling approaches for different situations, for different stakeholders involved in product development. Then we had a series of workshops related to design methods, where we aim to clarify what are we actually talking about? What are the different means that are embedded, that are recommended in order to support the design process? And currently, we have a focus on the different paradigms that we see in the way product development is managed. So we see and we observe in industry the shift over the last years. Some companies are more active than others, but we see that some companies start adopting agile approaches in their product development activities and move forward, coming usually from a stage gate-based modeling paradigm. And this is what we currently focus upon. So what does that mean? What does that shift from stage gate to more agile approaches or alternative approaches means for industry, means for research? And currently we start a new workshop series beginning today. So today the workshop here at Design Conference is the kickoff event, where we try to identify who has a similar interest and might get a benefit out of attending the next workshops that will be held later this year and early next year. But I will say more about this workshop series at the end of today's workshop. So today we focus on the different on competing paradigms for managing product development activities. This special interest group in regular times, how we usually interact is that we meet during design conference, we meet during ISET, and we have smaller workshops, sometimes a bit bigger, sometimes up to 30 participants, but usually we are 15 to 20 researchers coming from all over the world. Yeah, we are quite international, with a slight emphasis on Europe as the whole design society. We meet in person usually, and we have quite strong emphasis on networking, on discussions, and have smaller regional workshops that center around shared topics that we use for subsequent set of workshops. Usually, so we have 3-4 workshops that build directly on each other, and they result usually in particular results. So we try to address specific research questions, which we then report back to the wider community using the ISET conference or design conference. So we have joint publications, and we also had already publication in the Design Science Journal over the last few years. I think we can consider ourselves as a quite active special interest group with on average 3 up to 4 workshops every year, which we think is a good means, especially also for younger researchers to get in contact with others, and not just with other researchers, but also with industry experts that are attending our workshops. And we hope that we can start this year to come back into this mode of operation, that we meet more often in person and can intensify our discussion, which I still, even after 2 years, think is somewhat hampered by online formats. This being said, I think this would be the best time for Claudia to introduce herself before the other participants will have the chance to introduce themselves. And I would ask everyone to activate the camera while you're speaking, so that we can see you and know who you are. So Claudia, can you speak now? But we cannot hear you. Just test it once again. Okay, I hope this is not a problem for everyone.
No, we can't hear her. She's enabled on Hopin. I don't know. It's a problem on her end, probably.
Okay, then maybe Lisa, you start first, and then
Claudia, try to refresh the page, please.
Okay, yeah, while she's doing that, hello everybody, my name is Lisa Rösler. Like Professor Gericke already said, I am currently working as a research associate at his chair at the University of Rostock, and I am interested in agile project management, especially in highly restricted areas, like for example in medical engineering or like in aerospace design. Yeah.
Thank you. So maybe we just go through the speakers first, so that the others that can join later and introduce themselves. So Sabine, could you please introduce yourself?
Okay, it's working. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Sabine Muschig. I'm working at German Werkzeugmaschinen. I'll introduce that later on. I'm interested in modeling processes since my own PhD time, and still doing that in my industrial career. So this is also why I'm here today, to present to you some of the the ideas and the challenges that we currently have. So.
Okay, thank you. Claudia, second try. Nope. Maybe if you just restart the browser and join us again, we will continue. And I would propose Alexander. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. Thanks a lot. My name's Alexander Axberger. Currently, I work for Webasto, and I'm also very delighted to give you an insight from industrial practice on how we're continuing with our agile way at Webasto, and also the implications that it has on our product development process. So yeah, thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you for joining us. Clément, would you like to introduce yourself? Or Udo first?
Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me to this workshop. I'm currently working at the University of Linz in Austria in the Department of Business Informatics. And I've been interested in a broad area, on a broad range of processes, from design processes to business processes and manufacturing processes, starting with a very descriptive point of view with the function behavior structure framework at the beginning of my career. Now I shifted a bit more towards a more prescriptive view, so a management type of view. Looking at how can we manage processes in a more agile way, with a particular focus now on Industry 4.0. Thanks.
Thank you. Claudia, we can't understand you. Seems to be a problem with your audio device. Michael Vogt, at least I guess it's a German name. I just picked names out of the members list or the participant list. I wonder if that's a problem. Yeah, okay, you're active.
Now, can you also hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. It seems a little complicated in this tool here, I guess, but now it worked. So my name is Michael Vogt, and I'm basically doing research on design processes for facades. So this workshop is pretty interesting for me too.
Okay, Matteo, as you're visible, you're the next.
Okay, ciao, nice to meet you. Thank you for the opportunity. I had some technical issues, crashed the browser, but now I'm back in. I'm senior professor at the University of Bologna, and I'm a long-time member of the Design Society and also the Design Conference. And I'm really interested in this topic as we have an active research line in my team on hybrid models. So how to support organizations that want to decide what product development process they are using, and also how to understand when it's best to hybridate them. We have a paper that was out in Research and Technology Management on hybrid model matrix, it's called, and we are working with a PhD and a young researcher on further develop this approach and understand under which conditions to choose one method over another. I don't know if I presented myself correctly because I didn't listen to the quote, but I thought that was like an intro.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Clement Fortin?
Yes,
I pronounced the name wrong, but
No, I think you can hear me. Yes, my name is Clément Fortin. I'm from Canada. I've worked many years at École Polytechnique. I come from PLM and integration of design and manufacturing. And now I'm in Skoltech, New University in Moscow, and I'm teaching system engineering and looking agile system thinking as one way in research, and tools to implement this are still lacking. So this is very, very interesting to look at traditional versus agile. Yes.
Thank you. Jan Mehlstäubel.
Hi, hi everyone. My name is Jan Mehlstäubel. I'm a research associate at the Institute for Technical Product Development of the University of the Bundeswehr in Munich. I'm interested in design methods and also process modeling. At the moment, I'm working at a project for machine learning in variety management, but I'm also interested in the whole topic of systems engineering.
Thank you very much. Eva Vanessa Bruno.
Hi there, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Eva from Turin in Italy. I am a PhD student in management, production and design at Politecnico of Turin. And my research interest is about the design-driven industrial conversion strategy for companies in difficulty. So I'm very happy to attend your workshop.
Thank you. Yvonne Wong.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Yvonne Wong from Singapore. I work in the Singapore University of Technology and Design, working with Lucienne. She's my co-supervisor. So I'm a PhD candidate and very interested in using design process modeling to improve design processes, building design processes in the built environment. So in the architect, engineering, contractor industry. So right now in my stage of research, I'm actually starting tomorrow, going down to the industry to collect data to see how I can map the whole complicated design process using all your amazing tools. That's why I'm here at the workshop. Thank you so much.
So while I'm doing something in parallel, getting in contact with Claudia, I lost a bit of overview who already introduced himself or not. But I think there are 2 or 3 participants left. Maybe just I haven't asked you yet, you just activate your microphone and start speaking. Lisa, did I miss someone? Yeah, Mr. Reichelt, yeah. Okay. Florian Reichelt, did he already? No. I just have read his name multiple times now, but he asked for permission.
But now he's gone.
Dropped out and then came back. And Claudia, can you try again? Nothing changed. I try to invite you hop in for a personal conversation. Maybe you just check if that works. No, that's externally, so we should not try that. Now I muted you on purpose, and now I removed that. Maybe it changed now. No, it's not a software, it's something on your computer. Okay, that means I think we have introduced ourselves. It's a pleasure to see so many new faces, to be honest, because we had absolutely no idea who would be joining this event and how many would be joining this event. Usually at these ISET or design conference workshops, we can expect around 20, 25 participants, and we can prepare in advance and adapt our workshop to this usually similar sized group. Today, that was not entirely clear, but what we've been able to do is we reached out to some of our contacts like Sabine and Alexander and asked them if they would be willing to give an insight into challenges in industry and experiences in industry with regard to the topic of our workshop. And also Lisa and Udo, but from an academic perspective. So I think and I hope that these 4 keynote or impulse, the short presentations will set the scene for the subsequent discussions. And from your short introductions, I think it is a nice fit that I think there is enough interfaces for a discussion afterwards. So what are we talking about? What do we want to address? The topic that we addressed today came from a meeting with the advisory board of the special interest group. And the advisory board, while these are the most active members of the special interest group from academia, like John Clarkson, Ola Isaacson, David Wynn, we also have members from industry, and we had multiple discussions during other meetings, and we identified there is a need that we should address in this community, that we talk about the problems, the challenges that we see with the introduction of new approaches, especially, of course, agile approaches for managing product development. While this is not an entirely new topic in this community as such, I think we now see an emerging picture of what the problems are. Some reiterate and we hear the same stories, but interestingly, sometimes we hear also quite interesting success stories from companies. And I think it's now becoming clear that our understanding of the implications from moving from other more conventional management approaches or product development approaches to more agile approaches is highly relevant. I think this is something where we, to some extent, need to understand the experiences in industry, but also we need to provide explanations for successes, for failures, and therefore this exchange, this platform today is, I think, the right means. And before we move into the discussion, that was just the last slide for the introduction now, I think it would be the right time to clarify what we actually mean by conventional approaches or what we mean by agile approaches. That's probably clear for most participants, but we want to avoid that we talk about different things and that we align our views on the terminology so that people more easily follow and understand the arguments that we might hear during the discussion later today. And whenever Claudia is ready, she can introduce herself, but I think we start with the first talk, and first talk will be given by Lisa. Therefore, I stop sharing my screen and give her the stage. Lisa.
Yeah, thank you for the kind introduction.
Okay, I see your screen multiple times. Now it's good.
Do you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I would like to give you a short overview over conventional and agile paradigms, because they can both be found in various publications when dealing with product development. This is due to an increasing interest in the agile paradigm over the last years. Researchers as well as practitioners always seek for new ways to improve product development processes, and the agile approach makes a lot of promises. Like, for example, that it leads to shorter development times and increases customer satisfaction. So in the next few minutes, I would like to present a short characterization of both paradigms for our discussion later on. Sorry. Yeah, but before I come to that, I would like to emphasize that every project is unique, and projects are in general very complex because of various uncertainties and because of the interdependencies between people and activities. But they are also influenced by many factors, like, for example, the size of a company, the level of maturity in project management of that company, the technological uncertainty, the size of a team, degree of innovation, or the scope of the system that is to be developed. So, considering the existence of a broad spectrum of projects, the question is, what paradigm would be the most promising for the development of new products? And the approaches I refer to as being conventional are, for example, the stage gate model by Cooper, the model that is presented by Paul and Weitz, or the V model. And representatives of agile approaches are, for example, Scrum, DevOps, or also Scale and Agile. Approaches that are considered conventional all have some kind of process containing phases where activities are carried out and milestones where decisions are made. The overall development approach is plan-driven and based on an extensive control of the phases. The primary goal is to provide everyone involved with predictability, stability, and high assurance. Decisions are taken at predefined gates by managers, mostly. It also has to be mentioned that conventional approaches rely on documented plans, and the focus of controlling the process lies on quantitative control. Customer interactions are integrated into the development process as needed. More importance lies on contracts, so that they usually contain all the information needed to develop the product. And the last important aspect is conventional approaches attempt to define all the requirements for a product upfront to avoid costly changes later in the process. Development approaches that follow the agile paradigm are highly iterative and flexible and are based on constant feedback and change. Their goal is to respond quickly to change and to achieve value rapidly. Here, decisions are made pluralistically by the team members, and customer relations are considered as very important and helpful to focus on the increments with the highest value. Also, change is seen as valuable and uncertainty is embraced. So when trying to compare both paradigms, the following statements protrude for me. First, none of the paradigms is an all-rounder that is suitable for every kind of project. They always have to be evaluated according to a project's characteristics and the environment in which a project is conducted. It also has to be mentioned that a majority of problems that occur when implementing any kind of development approach can always be traced back to a false application. That is, applying an approach on a project it is not suited for, or a false understanding of the development approach, a false understanding of its intentions. And fourth, when looking at the advantages and disadvantages, you will probably notice that the strength of one paradigm is not necessarily a weakness of the other. So what has to be done instead of just comparing is to evaluate both paradigms in the context of a specific project, which could look like this. As I mentioned before, both paradigms differ according to their primary goals. So project managers would have to decide which way would be best for their project, stability or responding to change. The paradigms also differ in the aspect size. Like, for example, while a conventional approach is better suited for larger projects and larger teams, the agile approach is better for the exact opposite, smaller teams and smaller projects. Of course, as a next step, it would be important to define what is large exactly and what is small, but this could differ from company to company. What you can see here is just an example how a characterization and therefore how a decision for a paradigm could look like. But there are numerous other aspects that have to be considered, like, for example, in the area of management, interactions between customers, but also between team members and between management and team members, and also technical issues. So to conclude my presentation, I would like to repeat my statement from before. As every project is unique, the development approach also has to be chosen deliberately. It has to be adapted to a project's characteristics and its environment. For example, also the development approach has to be adapted to the size of a company, to its level of maturity in project management, to the scope of the system that is developed. It has to be customized to the expected technological uncertainty and the degree of innovation. Others suggest that a combination of an agile and a conventional approach would be best to make use of both of their advantages. So a solution could also be some kind of hybrid approach that covers a broader spectrum of projects. But yeah, this has to be discussed, maybe later. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you very much for your presentation. I propose that you ask questions if you have direct responses or questions to Lisa's presentation, just to avoid misunderstandings before we continue with the next talk. If you have an interest, I don't see a possibility to raise a hand in this tool here, but maybe you just activate your microphone and say something.
Well, Lisa, I found your presentation very interesting, and you set the discussion very well. And of course, I think the answer is in hybrid approach, and when how to combine is the big question for me.
Yeah,
but very interesting.
I think Mattia wants to say something. At least it looks like you want to say something. Is that right? If not, yeah, you want to, but we cannot hear you.
Try refreshing the page.
Now we can hear Marco and we can hear Claudia.
Yes.
So, Claudia, that's good that you can join us, and maybe Mattia finds a way to, or you just use the chat in the meantime if you want to directly ask something to Lisa. And while you're typing that question, Claudia can say a few words.
Welcome. Apologies about struggling to get into the meeting. I think it takes up a lot of computer space, and my computer was struggling with it. But anyway, I'm delighted to finally be here. I'm Claudia Eckert. I'm professor of design at the Open University. I've been running the SIG with Kilian for the last, I suppose, nearly 10 years. My interest is essentially in product development practice and industry. And in particular, I'm extremely fascinated by how one can model product development processes and by the relationship that the model has to the process that comes out at the end. And thank you, Lisa, for your talk. I think that was very clear and very helpful.
And Matthias wanted to ask on what literature basis you have done your analysis. I mean, yeah, just respond.
The list of literature is very long, but I have some literature filtered for the presentation. I can maybe share my presentation again, so you can see that.
But there's also a chance to read her analysis, because actually Lisa gave the same presentation that, or a similar presentation that she will do later this week, which is based on a paper accepted here in the conference. So there you will find more on what she just presented here.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay.
And no, I was just wondering if you were encountering also hybrid models or other type of innovation methodology rather than staging gate and agile.
Yes, of course, there are different kinds of hybrid approaches that are already discussed, but I think there's not one perfect solution, and I think it's very hard to characterize hybrid approaches because they are so different from each other, how people interpreted the model. So this is why I left it out here.
I think that could become a question that we discuss later. So when does an approach become a hybrid? So how long is it still an agile, or how long is it still in stage gate or conventional approach? And what is the core that needs to be modified in order to become a hybrid? So what is actually the thing that distinguishes those three paradigms? Therefore, we use the term paradigm, which are broader than individual approaches. So maybe you can enlighten this group later in the discussion if you have ideas on this.
Yes, I think it's a great question to ask. Thank you.
Okay. I haven't seen any other questions in the chat or immediate responses. So I propose that Sabine can start her talk. It seems you agreed. So then Sabine, it's yours. You can start.
Thanks. I have just a quick question. I have a video included in the presentation. I'll just try if it works. If not, I would need probably the help of our kind moderator. So we'll see.
I think it should work. You should just share your screen. The question is if the audio file is also shared. I don't know.
Oh, there is a checkbox saying system audio to be.
Yes, just check that and it should work.
Okay, perfect. So let's go. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So let's start. I decided on giving you a little different view on our challenges tackling the topic human in the mid of those different types of approaches. So it's called human centricity as a central paradigm to manage future product development processes. And I'm keen on seeing how you'll find that insights and which question you will have. So I'll just start. Maybe just a quick overview of our company, because maybe some of you don't know TRUMPF as a company. So we're a manufacturer of sheet metal machines. We have two big business units selling machines which work on the whole sheet metal process, and also the lasers which are integrated into those machines. And what is also interesting to know when we later talk about the process approaches is that we have a pretty broad scope of different products that we develop and sell, and we have pretty big depth also in developing. So nearly everything which is included here in the machines is developed by our employees. So this is something which we need to deal with when looking at also development processes. So,
do you also wonder how we will work in the future and what?
Oh, sorry, that was. I need to. Sorry, just keep my hands off. Oh, let's try once more.
Do you also wonder how we will work in the future and what tomorrow's product development will look like? Welcome to the utopia of Trumpf machine tools. We have already taken the first steps on the path to utopia. For example, by introducing agile methods, separating product responsibility from employee management, or introducing functional system modules. But the path to utopia at Trumpf does not end here. Join us on an exciting journey into the future, together with Dora Developer. This is Dora Developer. Dora is a mechanical engineer at Trumpf Machine Tools, and is responsible for a system module of our 2D laser cutting machines. Dora has an idea for a new machine feature. She brings the idea to the product daily and convinces the product team. Together they want to look for a possible implementation. Incidentally, the product team consists of colleagues with different backgrounds and represents all relevant areas. There are no hierarchies there either. On Fridays, the product team has agreed to work together in a focused way on innovative ideas. First, Dora pitches her idea and explains her vision and the business case. Then all team members refine what they want to clarify for today. Their goal is to go through a complete DevOps cycle. In their case, that means clarifying the requirement, creating sketches and programming code, building a minimum viable product that will be fully simulated and then tested at the customer site. This allows them to take customer feedback directly into account. They are especially proud of the last step, because it means completely new possibilities in development. On Friday afternoon, the team has its first minimum viable product and knows that they want to bring the feature to all of Trumpf's customers. So the team now gives itself the official mandate. Therefore, they don't need the decision of a management board. Now the reference models of the system modules are adapted. The system modules are functionally cut and can now be changed on the basis of the requirements. To do this, the meta models are analyzed and changed in the necessary places. Dora Developer can now make the changes to her system module. To do this, she adapts parts lists, CAD models, and the variant configuration. She can make adjustments to the electrical, fluid, and software components herself. She is supported by the PLM systems and knows exactly where she has to make changes. She had a few questions about the fluidic components, but she was able to clarify these with the fluidic expert. She was also able to build the simulations together with her expert. The test cascade is automatically generated and runs based on the changed interfaces. Dora now tests older machines from the last 10 years on a virtual farm, ensuring backward compatibility. Fortunately, the device farm has recently been optimized, so this area-wide test only takes a few hours. Dora also decreases risk by making a virtual startup procedure of the new feature in a digital twin. Last but not least, she would also like to test the feature directly with the customer in real operation. To do this, she makes this feature available as a beta version in the online update portal. A first customer in Asia gets in touch and directly installs the new software version on his machine and orders the necessary hardware components. Dora had planned well so that the conversion kit does not have to take place with a service technician. The customer can modify the kit with the help of augmented reality service support. The service technician sits at Trumpf in Ditzingen and supports the customer via his VR glasses. Dora can now directly evaluate the first experiences of the beta customer. Everything is tested so far. The first customers are already satisfied and now the feature is released. This step is necessary to separate the minimum viable products and the different development stages from the series. Future customers can now unlock this new feature on their own machine, for example, by one-time payment or subscription model, and the required conversion kit will be delivered by mail. Dora remains responsible for the feature. From now on, the focus will be on continuing to support the feature in operation. Further customer feedback will lead to a further development of the feature. At the end of the month, Dora is proud and excited about the success of her own work. She and her colleagues have achieved so much in such a short time.
So, sorry. So, one question into the audience. If you reflect on that video, we called it a utopia. Can you imagine why the utopia is so utopic with regard to the process that we just saw in here, or the process features? Are there any ideas? None?
Just to respond to it, yes, of course, I have an idea, but I'm gonna show you my view in my presentation.
Okay, good to know.
I think that one reason is that it's the continuous change process that's taking place there, and change is a huge dimension in all this.
I also think that regarding the change process, I also think that this will definitely become a main issue, that you not just change your processes, but also the culture in your company, that people can really adapt to this and that they understand how to what is being expected in the future. So I think that's the biggest problem that we see here.
I think also maybe unexpected change propagation of all of these updates, because if you overlook one little thing, then one of the customer machines, which might not have been used as you thought it would be intended, stops working, and then it's all Dora's fault.
So thanks a lot. I will just keep on discussing your ideas right away in the presentation. If we look at the challenges we just saw in the utopia realized and project them on product development processes, we can derive some of the necessary characteristics of future PDPs. Of course, here with the perspective on our industry, but maybe also some of them are transferable to other products or product development processes of other industries. So of course, all of them are framed by the strategy we are working on, which is a very high-end driver of the further evolution of the product development process. We have the strategy to be a solution provider in 2025. That means from just selling machines right now to sell real systems, from sensor to cloud in the future, and also to provide totally different service models. Which also means that we have to change the way we develop today to be able to provide that solution in terms of products tomorrow. And that is also where this video got into realization, to reflect on how we need to work to be able to provide those type of products tomorrow. And in more detail, this is that we need to cover in most of our products hardware, software, services, not only focus on mechatronics, but also on programming software and cloud software. So it needs to be adaptable across disciplines. Of course, the standard requirement is robust and standardized products also across the life cycle, ensure also quality, be scalable. That's what I just said on different system levels. One most important one important function also is what was already mentioned in the talk before, is the being dynamic in providing the products in shorter cycles than today and getting close to the customer. And this is really interesting, looking at a product like a machine, which is not a software function. And that was also what we talked about, those system modules, to look at smaller features to be delivered in shorter point of time. Then the question of a global organization and also ecosystems. So organizations which do not end at the organizational border of their own company, but collaborate together with different institutions to provide a new product. Of course, the whole virtualization topic, being virtual and model-based throughout the whole life cycle. And last but not least, the topic of self-responsibility. So you saw that Dora was able to do the decisions themselves without asking her managers at the single steps of the process. So she was self-responsible to keep on developing the next step depending on the maturity of her development feature. So these are very high-level characteristics of potential future product development processes. And if we go a little deeper in the current state, I tried to generate an overview just to give you an idea of where we are today. So just to clarify the picture, the big bubbles shall symbolize the different types of products that we have. We have pure software products, which we sell as a product. We have ecosystem projects where we work together with research institutes, with other companies. We have the classic machine projects where we develop new machines, like in the past. And then we have new digital products like digital services, which we provide for our customers. For example, analytic functions or functions that the customer is able to rent, for example. So, and the small bubbles at the big bubbles, they should symbolize the high end and the modeling approach, which is rather used for the high level planning of the projects, and the small one is shall symbolize the operative planning. So taking software in software projects, we are using a DevOps cycle for doing the projects, and people use simple agile methodology to do their daily business. Then we have those ecosystem projects where we do not have a real high-level planning process, which is quite an issue. In the machine context, we have the traditional stage gate process, which is symbolized here. And also for new digital products, we do not really have a high-end modeling approach. And they are all somehow interlinked because they are, in some cases, needed as an increment for the other project. And then we have a top-down portfolio management, which is rather classical with a stage gate approach. So what we see, taking into account the characteristics which we just defined before, looking at the cycle issue, we have here approaches where we are able to deploy very often, like in software, with the development and the DevOps approach. And we have those machine cycles where we need like half a year to put into place the next release of a machine change. So customer integration is also very different. In the classical idea with the machine, you build a prototype and then you test the prototype and then you make changes to the prototype and then you go outside and test it at the customer. In the DevOps cycle, you will release very soon when you have the first software version built. You might be able to deploy it at a test customer and test it right in place. So this is also pretty different. The development disciplines are only partially integrated into the process, so not really interlinked, even though they have relations between them. So one is dependent on the other to step on in the process. Robustness and quality also means of testing and simulation is partially in parallel, partially sequential. We do not have a real common digital backbone for all of these. Also very interesting, the topic of collaboration. We have different agile frameworks here. So as those approaches evolved from the single development departments, they are all differently. So they are not really interlinked. And also when you look at those cross-company collaboration, they do also use different agile approaches, which are not really interlinked in terms of planning cycles, for example. And last point is the deliverables. So in that portfolio perspective, planning and stuff, which we also just heard, is mainly done top-down with regard to budget and capacity. And in that agile manner, we further look at increments rather than the whole feature, the whole product. So this is the status quo. Just have a look at the team perspective. I do not go into detail in all of those issues, but what I just wanted to emphasize here is if we leave that structural side and look at the team side, we see, that we have a lot of self-responsibility, self-organization in the team rather than in the top-down planning. They decide and act entrepreneurially. They develop on their own. They have their creative freedom without asking anyone and manage themselves. So this is quite a different type of acting and developing than in that top-down approach. So this is actually the key of my thoughts, which I wanted to discuss with you today. The question is a little bit who actually manages the product development process. Because there is also the problem that I've identified for our organization. We experience a change in the cultural mindset. So we come from a way of working, which is mainly derived from a division of labor, so top down, to a more decentralized, self-organized organization, which is acting more in a kind of a network. And when we now look at the organization, this change is implemented quite differently or evolves quite differently in the different development departments on the one hand and in the management on the other hand. So not everyone is on the same maturity level and also mindset level, so that this totally different types of working would act together without any challenges. So looking at the process again, there is a mismatch actually in the conduction of the product development process. The classical approaches are more top-down phased and imply a more top-down management also. Those agile approaches rather have a people-based or bottom-up based approach, which is in the conduction of the process totally different. And you can see that actually in the decision points. So a team can, of course, only decide themselves on the next step if they are being delegated that decision possibility. And if the other side, for example, the management doesn't delegate it because they think top down and frame the project so strongly that they would not leave the freedom. On the other hand, this freedom to decide would not be there. So this is where you actually have the mismatch in the two approaches where it collides today. So decisions are often blocked and interrelations between the different development departments do not become visible or also handleable. So now what's the implication? If we would do the contrary to the utopia, we would see that we would not be able to follow all these visions that we just posted. Especially, we will not have that consistent collaboration via networks because we'll still have inhibited infrastructural and mindset boundaries. We would be hindered by less acceptance and mindset, especially regarding the continuous learning of that organization, and most likely also that classical hierarchies cause wrong decisions, because that is one of the biggest reasons why those agile methods were implemented, because it was simply too complex for the classical manager to oversee all implications that he would cause with his decisions. And if you would just continue working the same way or deciding the same way, this would not change, and potential talents would also leave. So seeing the implication for the company, of course, we would not reach the strategy that we actually would aim for and lose track. So maybe also as a basis for the discussion, as what is the perspective for coping with these challenges? First of all, one of the learnings was that actually the strategic methodological direction is actually the baseline for the approach adaptation, or also the further evolution of the process. Not a new thing to do, but a systemic perspective is really helpful in the first place to create transparency. And most likely a kind of a hybrid approach could be to manage dependencies instead of 100% of activities, like in a relational view, that you provide different flight levels to ensure also strategic to operational fit, because the pure agile approach doesn't always provide the full strategic view. So this might be helpful to couple those two perspectives. The user centricity, so decide in the process where the things or the development happens. Also very important to provide synchronization points in terms of consistency between the different product development teams or projects, to keep on with consistency in the operational view as well as in strategic view. And then oh, okay, this is double, sorry for that. And of course, the iterative process evolution, to be open-minded and accept that the process will potentially further develop as things move on, and would not stay the same as in the past, where we had the same process model for like 10, 20 years. So that would be it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for your broad overview on your experiences so far, which I find quite interesting. I have a direct question for you. On slide 14, what you just showed was rather a dystopia than a utopia. And you explored what are the challenges that you currently face. And I wonder if what you face currently, whether this is due to a transition phase of your company, or alternatively a transition phase in our professional community, which would rather request a cultural change in a whole community, or whether it is a lack of fit for purpose of the management approaches as such. So these are three, rather different explanations for what you see and what you expect coming next. So what's your opinion?
I guess it's the first two are probably depending on each other. So I guess it is definitely one part is also the further development of our organization, but this further development is also triggered by external influences, when we see that we cannot cope with the conditions that we are facing actually. So and this is more or less an external influence. So I guess it's a little bit of both. So we're reinventing the organization based on changes that are applied from outside the company. And of course, now we're in a phase where this is there's a lot coming up, and yeah, but it's something that we also experience looking at competitors or at also different machine companies with a simple with a similar challenge on the product. So.
Okay,
And I think maybe just one more idea. I guess what is really key to that is the change in the leading paradigms and the leading understanding of leadership and the development. And I think this is a very central question also for the process dilemma. Am I leading in terms of giving framework for the process and giving the people the frame to work in it, or am I leading by giving the people the ability to work in that environment? I think this is a very central question, and I think this is a question which is not only in our company but also for a lot of different other companies. Just key right now to cope with complexity, to cope with the changing requirements. So,
but you say that the management culture, the way people lead teams, lead employees, and is a central factor for the success of applying these approaches. During your talk, you created a link between the established management styles or leadership styles to the approaches, like stage gate is rather top down, and you have a more decentralized, slightly bottom up culture related to the agile approaches. I wonder if that's truly the case, or if you could use an evolved leadership culture also based or integrated in a more stage gate environment. If that's so, what I want to ask you is if the leadership style is truly connected to the management paradigm, or if an evolving leadership style could also be embedded or used for more conventional approaches. Is that a conflict, or is that possible?
I would say it is not necessarily a conflict, but it can easily lead to a conflict. It depends on how you interpret the process and which freedom you give, especially on the decision spots you have in the process. So if you accept that at the stage gate, you would really evaluate the situation, be able to step back, to iterate once more, to hear people giving you the information on the maturity of the product and stuff like that. I think then it would be possible. But I think the chance, maybe let it formulate this way, the chance that you would be more top down and be more strict with the leadership is higher with the stage gate than with an agile one.
Okay, thank you. Are there other direct response questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Sabine. On one of your slides, you mentioned that there has to be different flight levels. And I imagine that this is different views or abstraction levels, but are you talking more on the management side or on the solution side or the process side? What is your perspective on this comment?
Both, but more on the operative side, but on the coordination point of view. So what we experience is that we have, let's say, 100, 200 development teams working on different features of the different products. And they may be working autonomously for quite a time, but at some points they need to coordinate because they have dependencies. And this is one flight level above the operational work, but it's still people from the operative teams who come together and see what is needed from each other to continue working in the value stream. So that would be a potential flight level. Of course, we have also strategic flight level, which would be one level above, where we have, like, for example, the roadmaps for the next 3 years, which is then broken down and also again mapped to the value stream. So we see, okay, what is needed to be done until when. But yeah, that would be the main 3 levels that we just right now recognize for us.
Okay, thank you.
So Vida, I had a question as well. Thank you very much for your talk. That was really, really interesting and very well presented and very well thought through. So thank you. What I was wondering is that, you know, at universities, we used to have a lot of independence. And in recent years, at least in the UK, we've introduced so many processes in the names of quality control that one subjectively feels that almost all of the freedom and independence one has as an academic is gone. And that is all in the name of fairness, so that in some extreme case, somebody doesn't get neglected, and standardization and quality control. And that has created an incredibly puffed up management culture and really has taken the individual ownership away from people. And I was wondering whether you're sort of seeing that as a danger as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because one thing in the involvement of our company identity, let's call it like this, is that we're growing, getting bigger, and to cope with this growth, especially the organizational areas providing supporting functions like HR or the IT area. They also try to cope this growth and the global collaboration with strong processes. And this is at the interfaces where we, for example, we have products or we need collaboration with the IT department. And there you have the clash, because you have, you know, very strong processes on the one hand and kind of an agile manner of now I need something and I need a collaboration, which doesn't really fit. So yeah, we see that as well. And I guess that what we not yet did is really take into account all necessary functions which are really needed for in the value stream or in the whole product development process to be deployable. So yeah.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Maybe I have a question to a proposal. Usually during this conversation, during those workshops, participants ask for availability of presentations. And if you want to have that, and to the speakers, if you want to share your slides, I propose that you can just send the material to me and I will forward it to those who ask for access to the presentation. For example, Sabine, for me at least, it was quite difficult to understand the audio in your video. I think your mic was on at the same time and there was an echo. Maybe it was also challenging for others. So if that's okay for the speakers, it would be great if you share this with me and I will forward the data to those participants that contact me. If that's restricted material, of course, it's not. Therefore, I do not ask each one individually. Just forward your material if you want to or if you can. And everyone who wants to see or get access to the material, also write an email to me and I will arrange that, if possible. Okay, thank you.
Kilian, sorry, I have a question. Sorry, last minute. Do you think it's possible? Do we have time?
Yeah, we have time.
Sabine, can I ask you whether you are using in your company other, methods other than agile and stage and gate?
Other process approaches. Well, we have a very high-level product development process, which is also stage gate, but even more generic. Then we have that DevOps cycle in place, and the simple agile methods also implemented in different frameworks like Safe Approach and different other frameworks. But this is mainly it. We don't really have we don't really have different approaches.
I was asking that because, for example, Trump was working with Sugar Network a few years back on design thinking. So I was wondering if that was like something like an experiment, or you had some department or somebody that was working on that.
Yeah, we definitely have, but this is not implemented in broader areas. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, as I do not see more questions or text in the chat, I propose that we make a short break now, and we continue after the break with Alexander's talk. And as promised, we make a break of 15 minutes. So we continue at 14:55. So everybody can grab a coffee, and then we continue with two more talks, and then we can have a broader discussion on the subject. So please stay in the session, just mute your mic and video, and then come back 14:55. Thank you. Okay, I think participants are coming slowly back. Alexander, I can see you already.
Yes, I'm here and ready.
Okay. Do you also have video in your presentation, or?
No, I don't, unfortunately, but I really liked it.
Okay. So if others that who are coming back just shortly show the video or say something, it would be nice that I have a feedback. Okay. You don't have to remain live all the time, but just that I see, okay, you are back on your desk or wherever you are currently. Looks good. I think the break was well deserved after two interesting conversations or presentations and insights into current challenges at Trumpf, and I'm really curious to hear from Alexander what you do currently at Webasto. So Alexander, the stage is yours.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen now as well. So perfect. And
we can see it, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So yes, I'm going to give you an insight from industrial practice from the company I'm currently working for, Webasto. And the cool thing is that I did a kind of different presentation than the one that Sabine just showed us. And I think that really gives us a quite holistic picture, because I'm really focusing on our company, on our products, and also the agile transformation. So the agenda right here will be just to give you an overview of our company, so you can also understand what we do and what kind of products we have. Then I'm going to briefly talk about the journey, like the agile transformation we are currently on. I'm also going to show you the roadmap. And in the end, I'm going to focus on our current product development process and the problems we have with having this process in place. So first of all, just a brief overview about our company. We were founded 120 years ago, so we have quite a long history already. And our headquarters is close to Munich. It's in Stockdorf. And Webasto is known for being a tier 1 supplier for the automotive industry. That's what we do. That's our daily bread. Currently, we have roughly almost 16,000 employees. And this number has risen significantly over the past 15 years. And that's also a very important aspect when we talk about the product development process. Overall, we have more than 50 locations around the globe. And we also, like in the last year, generated around 3.7 billion euros in sales. But of course, with COVID and now the Ukrainian crisis, that's definitely something that we can really feel that really is something that we have to tackle. That's something that we have to be flexible in dealing with. We have a range of different products, and I'm going to dive into those in a second. Overall, you could say we develop and distribute roof systems, and here any kind of roof systems. We provide heating and cooling solutions. And 5 years ago, we also started to go into the field of electromobility. And if you're just going to take a look at the shares regarding the revenue, we generate most of the revenue, it's like 80% with roof systems. Around 17 or 18% is still with heating and cooling solutions. And the electromobility part is 2 to 3%. But even this year, like in Q1 2022, we really did see a great increase here. So let's dive into the products a little bit deeper. What I've learned is that a roof is not just a roof. There are many different types of roofs, starting from the classical sunroof, like on the far left, that all of you know. We've also like different kind of panorama roofs. They can be fixed, they can be openable. And also here, there's different innovations that you can implement here. Would it be ambient lighting in the interior, or switchable glazing, which means like on the touch of a button, the whole roof darkens. That's some of the aspects that can be integrated here. And also solar panels, like as a complete roof or on the sides of the panorama roofs. In addition to that, we also develop roofs for convertibles on the far right. And actually the newest thing that we also have presented at the IAA, so the International Automotive Exhibition in Munich last year, is the roof sensor module. And the roof sensor module, which you can see down here, that's basically a sunroof which has several sensors integrated. And these sensors can be used for autonomous driving. So for example, in this presentation, or like in this picture right here, we have 2 lidars, we have 6 to 8 cameras, and also radar sensors. And this is definitely one of the products that we hope to be the market leader in 2028 or 2030. And here, all of these sensors can also be equipped all around the sites with the different kinds of sensors, cameras, radars, depending on what the customer, so to say, the OEMs actually want. When we take a look at the heating and cooling solutions, and here you just see our heaters, there has been a shift. Most of you know probably the standard Webasto Standheizung, so the parking heater, which we are quite famous for. But here with electromobility also becoming way more popular, we also started to develop electric operated heaters, and a device like this on the top here can, for example, be found in the Tesla Model 3. So here we also expect to have a rise in sales over the next years. The last part, the last 2 business units, are battery systems as well as charging solutions. And on the top here, you can see our standard battery. And this standard battery is basically one big building block, and it's intended for electric buses. And since it's a standard battery, you can also link several of those modules together depending on the range of the vehicle that is needed. With regard to the charging solutions, we develop charging solutions for cars with this wall box, but also like small cord sets. And the small cord set is like the small device you plug into the grid, so the 230 volts, and directly into your car. That's a very brief overview about the range of products that we have. And overall, what you can see here, we have a variety of different products and also a broad range of applications. And this is like a big excerpt of the different applications that we currently have, which ranges from the standard cars to really off-highway agricultural vehicles, but also boats. So we really develop very specific solutions depending on the different customers that we have. And as you can see here, we really have a very broad range of different customers. So that was just to give you an overview about what Webasto does and what kind of products we develop. Now, actually, I would like to give you some insights about our agile transformation and the agile journey that we are on. Overall, like our initiative is called AHEAD, and that really stands for the complete effort that we undertake within this transformation. And I'm going to show you the roadmap very briefly here. One very important aspect, and that's also something that Sabine just mentioned, is to have a scaled agile framework for all the different development efforts to be combined into one framework, so it all comes together. And so we developed certain instruments, and one instrument is, for example, what we call the 6-field matrix. And this 6-field matrix is basically divided into 2 parts. So when we set up a new pilot, then on the first 3 fields, we really take a very deep look into the environment of the pilot. Whereas on the right side, that's where we dive into the pilot and the different conditions for the pilot. And this is always also in the same, we have the different levels. So first off, we're going to talk about the organizational setup, the team setup. And the second part, we focus on the roles. So the roles we have in the environment, but also the roles that we're going to have in this specific pilot. And in the end, it's also about the meeting structures. So the meeting structure in this pilot, but also to the surrounding, to the environment. Based on that, we have also developed our own collaboration model. It's called the hot dog model because we made it to look like a hot dog. And here we really focus on the value generation. And if you want to, I can dive into that a little bit later because I also have some slides regarding this model here. In the end, what we really try to do is we came up with certain guiding principles, because what we've experienced is that, of course, you need to have adaptations depending on the different team setups that we have, and also because of the different environments that we have for the different business units. I mean, you can imagine developing a roof is completely different than developing, let's say, a battery or a wall box. But all of these guiding principles help us to derive these different pilot setups on the same guiding principles. Now I would like to show you the roadmap here. And on the left, you see different stages, and these stages are displayed over time. So we started already in 2016, and for almost 5 years, we were trying out agility, but just on a team level. So here we had single team setups, and we introduced agile methods in certain business units for specific development teams. And over the time, there were more and more pilot projects, and we also managed to establish a small global community. So in the end, after 5 years, at the beginning of 2021, our board decided that due to the fact that we are really facing a lot of change in our company, that we're going to take it a step further, and that we're going to move from agility on team level into what we call scale agility. And scale agility with focus on product development, but in the region of Europe. So that was the limitation here, which is indicated by the blue box. And so for the last 1 year, we had 3 pilot projects, which were scale pilots. And the difference here is that we do not have just single teams working on specific products, but that we have, like in this case, it's like 3 teams who have to work together towards one product. So 3 teams in this example would be the product, a heater, like the electric heater that I just showed you. And there's like 3 different teams, like one team developing a heater core, the other one developing the housing, and the third team developing all of the ECU. And they're collaborating in order to develop one product. And that's just one of the parts of the pilot here. And we've been doing that now for 1 year. And now, since we saw that it really works, we're going to take it a step even further. So we're going to step out of Europe. We're not finished yet, but we see that it works, that the framework that we have developed is sufficient enough. It's not ready yet, but what we did works. And so we're going to move into the world now with this. So we're going to go global. So the next step for us is scale agility in the product development globally. But the overarching aim is that in the end, we're going to have an agile enterprise. But that's still a very, very long way to go. But that's what we work for. That's our goal. And indicated right here on the red line where we are right now. As I said, we have roughly 16,000 employees. The people that are in the region of product development are roughly 5,000 people. And from these 5,000 people, we are currently at, I'd say, 450 or 500 people who are already working with agile methods. So roughly 10% is where we are right now. Let's now shift to the product development process and the implication of it on the agile setups. At Webasto, we have basically 2 official processes in place. So the one thing is the TAP, so the technology development process, and the other one is, we call it the 1 PEP, so our product development process. And it's called 1 PEP because we want to have one process for every product development. As I said before, in the past 15 years, we were still relatively small, and there were a lot of M&As, so mergers and acquisitions. So we grew a lot over the past 10 to 15 years, which means in order for it to combine it together, there was an initiative. It was called One. And by doing that, by starting and implementing this initiative, we try to combine all the efforts again. And that's why we have the product development process that we have right now, the 1 PEP. And the 1 PEP, it consists of 16 swim lanes over 5 phases. And I'm just going to show you this very briefly as well. Into this 1 PEP, we have, of course, the different standards included. In our case, it's ASPICE, so it's automotive SPICE that we have to obey. Then, of course, also cybersecurity and safety relevant standards are also all in this 1 PEP included. This is a very easy representation of what our 1 PEP process looks like. On the top, you see the 5 phases. So it all starts with writing out the quotes. So we have the QEM, the quote entry meeting, and the quote release meeting. And once we get to certain, like the quotes released, then our project officially starts. And so the blue, what's it called? The blue rectangles here indicate the gateways that we have. So starting from project release to concept release, then all of the development takes place, and up until production release, until the project is finished at gateway 5. And on the left, you see the swim lanes that we have. And overall, there's 16 swim lanes. So in the end, what the actual 1 PEP looks like is this. So every color here indicates one swim lane. And what I'm trying to show you here is that you cannot see a lot, because it's a very, very big and holistic process, which tries to combine everything that is needed for every possible product development that there is at Webasto. But of course, this leads to several problems with regards to the actual product development for our projects. So that's the status quo. That's what every product development at Webasto has to follow. But it's very, very sophisticated for most product developments. So for this one PEP to be applicable in practice, the different business units try to tailor this process to their specific needs. But this is also quite, I'd say, exhaustive to really dive into that, tailor it, and once changes to this process come, to reintegrate them into the tailored versions. But that's the current status quo. So with regard to our pilot projects, what we try to do here is, since we are running in sprints and stages, so the sprint length, depending on the type of project, 2 to 4 weeks, and on top you see the stages, which are roughly 3 months, we still have to obey the gateways. So what we try to make sure is in the first swim lane, so the project management swim lane, we have user stories, and in these user stories at the beginning and at the end, right before the guideway, we try to make sure that all of the aspects which are in this specific phase are obeyed. And in the different swim lanes, we also always check the one PEP or the specific tasks within the swim lane and transfer them into user stories. That's how we currently handle the development in agile projects, and that's how it works. But that's definitely not perfect. So the next step for us as the agile transformation team will be to I'm just going to switch back. We're just going to take a look at the one PEP. We're going to rip it completely apart, and we're trying to rearrange it. That's what we're going to do in Q3, and that should give us at least the possibility to be a lot more suitable for agile development projects. So overall, I'd like to conclude this presentation with three takeaways. First of all, I think you now have an idea of the different types of products that we have. And of course, even for just like one product category, we have different degrees of complexity. If you take a look at the roofs, and also different degrees of innovation. So we always have to really take a close look how much of an agile setup makes sense for a very specific product development. The second takeaway, well, transformations take time. I'd say we are already quite fast with the agile transformation. So in this past year, well, almost 200 people that were integrated in this scaled agile setup. But as I said, I mean, we are at 10% right now, just product development. So this entire agile transformation, if we really take it to an agile enterprise, that will at least take us 5 to 7 years in order to complete it. And the last part, since I showed you our one PEP, well, the thing is that I've shown you the workaround, how we're dealing with it, but it's still a very heavyweight process. So in order for agile ways of working to really be easily and meaningful applicable, you really need a lightweight process and not one process that fits all. So thanks a lot. And I'm just going to end this presentation by sharing our vision that our inspiration drives the world of mobility. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation and insights into your current activities at Webasto with regard to transforming your development approach, your development process, the one PEP. I was just confused by your last sentence that you said there's no, you cannot integrate it into one process, but you called it one PEP before. So isn't that a contradiction?
It is a contradiction, but from having this one PEP in place, of course, you have one process which needs to be tailored. But I would say, actually, that's something that that is true. I have to correct myself here. You have to have one meaningful process. That's the correction I would like to make here.
I think tailoring is the key here. So you start from the same basis, and then you have to tailor it as the basis will not suit every individual project. I think that here we have already closed the loop to the presentation of Lisa at the beginning, where she emphasized the need to tailor according to the particular needs of the projects. And before I continue, maybe there are others who have questions. So also use the chat if you think that's a better way. So Matthias says, this is the most complex process you have ever seen. So you should just Google for the NASA wallpaper, which is publicly available.
Yeah, I have a question to Alexander. That one PEP process model that we've seen, is that a Gantt chart or is it like a process model with connections? I couldn't see properly what was in
Well,
between.
actually, it's not a Gantt chart. It has to be transferred into a Gantt chart. It's just a huge map, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to read it, you have to print it out in A2.
Okay, thanks.
And of course, behind every gray box, you see there are at least 4 to 8 steps which you have to, of course, check off, which have to fulfill in order to be able to proceed to the the next phase.
Mm-hmm, thanks.
Thank you for the question. Matteo, you wrote, can you write the reference here? Like what?
No, I was asking to Kilian the reference.
I will try to.
I was wondering, you said that you had 2 official projects in your company. And I'll ask the same question as Sabine. We have others, and also like when you showed the last slide, I was wondering how you were able to, let's say, align the phases with the stages, and how that it's felt as complex by people. Do you have people that skip some phase or go and have different, let's say, behavior rather than the standard that you posted here?
Well, the thing is that since we have to officially follow this whole process, for certain developments, of course, you can cross out certain areas, but that really depends on the type of product. So when you take a look, for example, in our business line charging, there's actually a big difference if you develop a cord set or if you develop a wall box, because for the wall box, we also have an app, which means it's just the hardware product on the one side compared to a hardware product and a software product, which means everything with regard to cybersecurity is relevant for that as well. So that's always where we really have to check for the specific projects.
And how many projects do you have at the same time?
Overall at Webasto, a lot. actually, I cannot give you an exact number, but a lot of projects. So multitasking of the team members is one of the biggest issues that we are currently facing. So I was talking about the hot dog model, which is the collaboration model. And what we try to focus on here is really one group of people, one development team, one interdisciplinary team, focusing on one product. Because we did a survey 2 years ago. On average, one developer is in 6 different projects, on average, which means we have a ton of projects.
Yeah, that's a topic that I really liked in the past, multi-one team membership, and what is the right level of multi-one team membership that drives more performance. Of course, when it's too much, then attention span kills, abilities and creativity. I have other questions, but I don't want to, take time from others.
I mean, that's very interesting topic. So, I mean, also like after this session, if we run out of time, we can of course dive deeper into it. I see there's another question from Yvonne. Does the M&A affect the transformation process? Well, actually, there are not too much M&As going on right now because of the current situation. So I would say no as of right now. But I mean, there was of course a reason why we had this one initiative in order to make Webasto one company again. For example, the development of the court sets that is done in California, close to LA, and that was a complete separate company. And so over the years, we had to integrate this company into the Webasto world. And maybe at the end of this year, this could also become a potential scaled agile pilot for us. So we'll see how things turn out. But of course, with the cultural barrier and maybe also having still the mindset of being a separate company could be quite challenging. So we'll see. I hope that answered the question sufficiently.
Are there other questions? Claudia, do you have questions?
I think I have a very specific question for you, and that is, how are you going to organize your testing process in an agile environment when you probably still have to test quite a lot and have to sort of pre-book testing weeks and all that sort of thing?
With regards to testing is, I mean, we have a very big testing facility in-house in our headquarters that makes life a lot easier. And of course, also testing people are part of the development team. It's always an interdisciplinary team. So we have the people in the team. And since we were just focusing on Europe, that was relatively easy because we could really use the facilities. Once we go global, that's definitely also going to be a challenge that we have to take a look at.
I think I was partly thinking because testing seemed to be the least agile part of an organization because it requires so much scheduling.
That is true. Maybe I can give you some more insights once the pilot projects that we're, like the scaled pilot project that we're into, are moving into the testing phase, because we are right in the platform development right now. But once we get there, I'm definitely going to take a look at how it's done there, and I'd love to give feedback on that.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Mateo, you want to see more of the hot dog model? Definitely. Kilian, do we still have time, or?
We do have time, yes. I think we should use the time to have a debate or discussion directly after the talk.
Then I'm just gonna jump into that. And so right here. So actually it's a very simple model. And as you can see here, it consists of 3 layers. So in the middle, we focus on the value creation, and that was very, very important for us. In the value creation layer, we have the development teams, and here we really focus on the product to be developed. Whereas in the lower part of the hot dog, in the lower bun, we have the system and product level as well as the strategy level. And here we focus on the customer and, so to say, on the customer requirements. At the top, we call it the competence and service layer. That's where we have our so-called chapters. And here we focus on the skills that are needed for product development. And for this model to be applied in practice, that's what one hot dog looks like. And one thing that's important, one hot dog always represents a business line for us. I mean, this is a very generic representation, of course. I'm going to show you in the next slide also what this hot dog model looks like when it's applied to a real business line. But for example, as I said, we have business unit, heating, cooling, and one business line here would be electric heating. So here you see on the value creation layer the different development teams with different foci. As I said, team A might be development of the heater core, team B the housing, team C the ACU. These are split by modules because in the blue circle in the product owner meeting, that's where we focus overall on the development of one product, which would be one electric heater. In the lower part, so in the purple circle, that's where the different developments are handled by the business line lead. Because within the business line, you do not just have one product, you have several product developments, which means you have several blue circles right next to each other. And that's the responsibility of the business line lead right here. In the top, as I said, we have the chapters. So every person within this hot dog model is actually linked to one of the chapters. So all of the agile people are in the chapter agility, and they're trained regarding their skill set. Same with the purchasing. All of the purchasing people are in their chapter purchasing. The chapter lead here also has the disciplinary lead in this model, and that's how this whole model is basically built up. But just for like on the level of business lines. In order for us to really move to an agile organization, we have to also take a step back and we have to see how the different hot dog models, which are placed next to each other, so business line next to business line, what this then might be. So we might have a box of hot dogs arranged next to each other, but that's something we still have to figure out. And to give you an impression of what this now looks like in practice, I know you're not going to see a lot, but that's what a hot dog for the business line electric heating looks like. That's still like at the beginning of this year, so it's not complete yet, but it gives you like a basic idea of how this whole thing works. So basically, right here, the blue circle down there, that's the next gen coolant. That's one of the products we are currently developing. You have all the people in here in the developments. and it's set up, well, in this way. And on top, you see the different people in their respective chapters, and different people are, of course, assigned to different projects, depending on the different colors right here. So as you see, this also gets quite soon quite complicated, but it works for us.
Just to clarify, so you did also separate product responsibility from disciplinary responsibility, is that right? Or did I? Okay. Since when did you work like that?
Well, that's the two big pilot projects that we started, and we kicked it off in October last year.
Oh, okay, that's interesting, because we did that separation as well, and we started July last year, so quite the same.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. This is really opening something that I was in aim to study, which is the transition of agile organization. So how product development process can support organization that have a more flat leadership and responsibility delegated to teams. So where the formal hierarchy has less and less power, which is a transition we see in most organization, in some organizations today. So that's a great example. So if you're okay, I'll follow up with you guys individually to understand how that works.
Sure, anytime. But one of the things which you, Sabina, also mentioned, I mean, leadership, that's definitely one of the biggest issues that you really have to tackle, and also the mindset of the leaders behind this, because setting up a model like this within a business line requires a lot of trust and understanding of the former managers. So that is really, quite an effort. That's why I also said transformation take time.
For sure. Thank you.
But I also saw the link to Sabina's talk and to Sabina's remark on leadership. And I was thinking the hot dog model that you just showed, whether this could be considered an extended matrix organization, but you shift your approach to leadership and responsibilities. But in the end, that's what we talked about. The approach, the way you run your project could be similar, could be different. However, approaching using the new leadership style that you propose here. So that seems the key element of your implementation is rather a shift in the way you delegate responsibilities and how you split that among different stakeholders in the team, which I find extremely interesting. And also what you said, you have that agile team, which you could also call process facilitators or team facilitators in a way. And they are trained with the necessary skills. So you have a new category in your matrix. Is that fair, or is that a misconception?
That's not a misconception. No. Since you're mentioning the matrix, in a way it's a matrix. However, what we currently have, that's a real matrix, and we have several dimensions, like a lot of dimensions. So if we were going to shift to that model, that would be like overall company-wise, that would be a gigantic improvement, definitely.
I mean, Alexander,
overall, there's like 5 dimensions.
Yeah, and it's based on people. So usually the matrix organization is based on business units. Here you scale down to that level. So you don't need only coordination factor among people. You also need, how you measure KPI, performance, how you align behavior with the strategy and intention. So there's a lot of different management tools that you need to develop in order to be able to foster performance in this organization, because all the management that we know, control systems, leadership, it all goes into let's say the hierarchy structure. So if you move down that to teams and you want to align teams, that's a whole different set that you need to put in place. That's why transformation is difficult, and also leadership is required, but you also need to design for it.
And that is exactly the point which I wanted to address before, because you need to agree on what you measure, because you don't measure the same KPIs as you measured before. When you measured maybe the time to market, or when you measured capacities or stuff before, and now you measure the time you need for the development of one increment, for example. This is totally different, because you deal with more uncertainty, and the uncertainty is something that where you trust the team, that the team will deliver in place, and the team will make the right decisions. And that is what I delegate as a leader, and what I didn't delegate before, because I just had that KPI, no matter if it was the right one or not. So.
Exactly. And on top of that, KPIs are different from team to team, because you might have different goals and different setting that the teams decide to use within their autonomy. So you need also to align that among the different teams to be able to understand if one team is going in the right direction or not. So yeah, a lot of challenges for research now. And I mean, you guys are pioneers.
Thank you. I agree on that. I mean, TRUMPF is known for being definitely a pioneer with this endeavor. And from what I've heard is that Webasto is also one of the few companies that, besides facing harsh challenges in these times, that we're still pursuing this way, and that we're continuing. Like also the commitment to say, okay, we're going to go global now. I mean, you can imagine last year wasn't the easiest for us. And also with the Ukraine crisis, like 2 days after it started, we had a task force in order to get all the people out there and to realign all the supply chains. It's challenging, but we're still on that way, and that's pretty cool.
Exactly, and the fact that you didn't give up coming back to the old way and keep on pushing, I think it's remarkable, but also because it's actually much more flexible in a way. So maybe you have some management problems, but the teams are much more flexible to self-align and decide what is the best way forward. So yeah, maybe you get stuck in controlling, but operationally, maybe the team are actually much better than other forms.
Okay, thank you very much for this lively discussion. I think this is extremely valuable, and therefore we slightly adapted also the agenda today to have more time for this direct interaction. However, I think we should still spare a bit of time for Udo's talk and for a concluding discussion, which will be shorter than intended. However, thank you very much. We can come back later to this, and I would move on and hand over to Udo.
Thank you. So let me share my screen. So I'm not sure if you can see my screen. Can you?
Not yet.
No, okay. I can only share. Okay, only one window. All right.
Okay, perfect.
So welcome to our presentation. So as the title of this workshop is about new or changing paradigms, I would like to present a paradigm that I think is emerging for modeling processes in general and design processes in particular, which is based on communication. But first, let me quickly summarize some of the difficulties in modeling design processes. So the first one is that there are possibly lots of designers involved, and there are complex interactions between them that are quite difficult to understand and describe formally. So there is concurrency, so or parallelism between different partial processes in the design, and there are lots of iterations and rework. And if we think about processes becoming more agile, we have a lot more of these iterations. Then the knowledge about the complete design process is often fragmented, so distributed among different people, different designers, sometimes even customers or suppliers, so they all might need to be involved. And so there are quite heterogeneous stakeholders that may need to collaborate, and they have different concerns, different goals, and very often they are all non-experts in articulating or modeling the design or process requirements. And finally, changes in the design process may need to be incorporated in the model. So we can have process models that are on a high level, like these stage gate processes. But if you want to make them more useful as a management instrument, you need to be able to look at the process in a more detailed way. And then it's, well, you can either leave it open and tailor the process, as we heard in the previous presentation, or you, well, once you tailor it, you might, realize that this is not the best way to proceed in the process, and you need to change things. So the bottom line of all this is that process models can be quite complex. In the previous talk, we've seen a complex process model. I have another example that I would like to show you. This is from the automotive industry. So this is, I think, a typical process model. We have these swim lanes, we have activities that are distributed among the swim lanes, and we have a lot of connections between them. So one difficulty is here, well, when you want to represent the complexity of the process, then you very quickly run into the difficulty. You also get a complex model. And when you do that, when you model this complex process, it's highly likely that you introduce syntactic errors. So for example, deadlocks in the control flow. So this is an example where we see a global control flow. So an end-to-end process where there are, you have a lot of issues regarding parallelism. This one end-to-end process is a monolithic model. So it's very hard to partition this model into different views. So when you model that, you need to bring all the people involved in this design process together, usually in a workshop, and they all need to collaborate on modeling, or at least validating this model. And scheduling such a workshop is quite hard, given the different time schedules of the people. So it's it's a very slow and tedious process. That's right. So and also it's hard to modify. When you introduce changes in one swim lane, you might have many changes in other swim lanes as well, which is also due to the fact that this is a monolithic model. So a different paradigm to think about the process is based on communication and I want to show you that this solves many of these problems. The particular approach that I would like to present is called SBPM. It stands for Subject-Oriented Business Process Management. But it's an approach that originates from the area of the control of automated systems. So it's based on process algebra, abstract state machines, and some organizational theory sprinkled into this. It was developed in 1994, and there are a few books describing the approach and its application in the production industry, so how to use this to represent production or manufacturing processes, and more generally in digitalizing work, which can be in any domain. Just quickly about this acronym SBPM. So subject-oriented means basically you have subjects, and this is the key component in this process modeling approach. Subjects in natural language are the active entities that fulfill a task, or you might say it's a piece of functionality, more exactly, which is different from the predicate, which is the action, and the object, which are the objects that are manipulated. So a global control flow is based on actions. So this is the primary component in such a model. In SBPM, you have the active entities as the main construct, and these entities, they need to interact, and they usually do this using communication. So a process is viewed as the communication between subjects, at least two subjects. It's a bit similar to design structure matrix approaches, so which focus on the deliverables, the documents or models that are exchanged between different people. Here, SBPM, it's a bit more extended into, it's almost a hybrid approach. So it uses ideas from control flow, but it's not a global control flow. It's a set of control flows. So these subjects, each subject encapsulates basically a control flow. And this is expressed in terms of state machines. So maybe just to give you an example what this looks like after this slide. So a bit more about the control flow aspect. So when you encapsulate parts of your process in a local control flow that you are responsible for, it's quite easy to represent that. So if we look inside a subject, we see a behavior, and this behavior consists only of three constructs. So one is I need to know which inputs do I get from whom, what outputs do I need to provide to others, and what do I actually have to do. So how do I transform my inputs into my outputs? And now I show you this example. So this is from the design and commissioning of a virtual factory. So we have different subjects, and we see messages exchanged between them. And I would like to focus inside the design subject. And so if we zoom into this, we can see the control flow of this subject, this particular subject, which is still a bit complex here, but we don't have any parallelism. We have only three types of activities, which is I need to receive messages, I need to send messages, and I need to do something. So, for example, the principal solution that I receive is incorporated in the internal behavior. Then the design solution is sometime sent to someone. So all these, all that I need to design a valid internal behavior of a subject is to process all these messages and do something. Yeah? So here we have the convention that every time I receive something, I need a red blob. If I send something, I have a green one, and if I do something, we have a yellow blob. So in this way, the stakeholder who is involved, in this case in the design, can very easily model their own process without having to care about what other stakeholders do with what they provide to them. The modeling process becomes quite simplified because it's the complexity is distributed among every modeler. Okay, and because the focus is on the communication rather than on some complex control flow logic, we can have incremental changes of a model. So here you see an example of a production process. So this was an iterative or incremental approach of designing this process. Because you have these clearly defined interfaces in subjects, you can change things more easily. So every time you introduce something new, a new message, it does not necessarily need to affect other subjects, because only those subjects that receive that message or that send that message are affected. And if you compare it with a control flow model, you have a much easier way of implementing these changes. Because with the control flow model, you almost have to start from scratch because of the complex control flow logic you need to consider. We've done some experiments using the communication paradigm and the control flow paradigm. So we used teams of process modelers. So each team had 3 people involved, and they had to model a process. With the communication-based approach, where you encapsulate the process and you need only interaction between the modelers when they talk about or when they define the interfaces, there you can use parallelized modeling. So you can independently model your own view of the process and only need to act with others when the interface is concerned. In the other approach, control flow, everyone typically has to sit at the same table. They need to attend to the whole end-to-end process, even if they are involved in this process only like a few percent, by a few percent, and which is a very ineffective way of modeling. So, long story short, we measured the time for the 2 groups, and we found that there's a very obvious benefit of using communication-based approaches. So, because 40% reduction in time on average between the 2 groups, and also they made fewer modeling errors. So this is an obvious benefit. I mean, here it's a matter of minutes. So the fastest group was 8 minutes. But if you scale it up for more complex processes that involve more than 3 stakeholders, you can still expect large savings of modeling time. Then, because you have a very simple modeling, let's say modeling ontology, where you need to consider only 3 types of activities, you also have very simple tools So you are not really dependent on very specialized tools that overwhelm the people. You can use Lego, you can use cards, or some more high-tech tools like this tabletop interface. But once you capture these, you can instantly validate them or execute them. So because these models, the internal behavior models, they are actually mathematical models, which are state machines or abstract state machines, which is you can also incorporate data structures. You can instantly execute them. And so instead of having to look at a static process model and try to discover, okay, does this process model really do what has to be done in the process, you can simulate the process immediately. Yeah, so from the models, you can basically import the model into workflow tools. There are a few of those commercial and academic tools, and experience what it means to actually execute that process model. So as a conclusion, so communication-based modeling allows a more agile process modeling approach, which is beneficial, or which I claim is beneficial for both agile design processes, but they don't necessarily have to be agile. I think if there's sufficient amount of complexity, can be even a waterfall model, then this communication-based way of process modeling is already useful and pays off. So why is it agile? Because it allows to decentralize process modeling so that it's no longer top-down, but more bottom-up. Yeah, you can involve the people that are actually participants in the process. You modularize it so it's easier to change things, and you simplify the model so you can get people on board to actually use the process model, and not just as a way of modeling what you've done in retrospect, or having only a very high-level model. It becomes like a working document, really like an artifact that people can use to communicate. There are tangible tools which allow, which allow to implement ways of working that are more reminiscent of design thinking approaches. And you have an executable process language where you can do rapid prototyping. Yeah, so where you can execute the process and not just look at static models of it. So that overall, we've done case studies in the industry, focused more on production processes, where the design process models were really regularly used by the people as ways of precisely communicating your process requirements and what you expect from other people in the process. So where really this claim is or was really confirmed in this in these case studies. So I would like to conclude. So first, give you my details if you want to know more about this, and a little advertising. I'm a guest editor in the Sustainability Journal, where I would like to invite you to contribute for the topic of Industry 4.0 process design. So you have another 2 months. So I would like to get maybe your input here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Udo, for your talk. I have an immediate response and question. You, with SBPM, you focus more on communication among team members or stakeholders in the project. This seems to be in line with what we discussed before, a stronger emphasis on leadership. So I think it's also that in that which is required or seems to be required in an agile environment. First of all, the question is that true, or is that do you have a different view on this? And the second related here is if you model communication, I'm not sure or do not completely understand the level of detail you need and how this approach with this math-based can cope with incompleteness. So if you do not model on a sufficient level of detail, you become, or you might be prone to an incomplete model. And might that be a source for failures in your model?
Okay, let me start with the second question, and I would like to ask you to detail your first question. I'm not quite sure if I understand it right with the leadership, where the connection is with leadership and communication. But maybe first the second question. So you can have incomplete models by just leaving some of the subjects you define in the process empty. So they don't have an internal behavior. They are basically viewed as interfaces to parts of the process where you don't need to focus on at the moment. So so you still have part of the process that you can validate as long as you provide the inputs and the outputs to that part of the process.
That was my concern. If I do not detail a certain work package or an element in the model, how do I know whether my list of inputs and outputs is complete? Especially if I have communication across different modules in your modular process structure. Inside a module, I think it's the likelihood of missing that might be low, but larger path in communication could probably be more difficult to track. That was my concern.
Yes, well, but I think yes, certainly you need to have a complete model, but I think that is true for any kind of model. And if you start with a model, you need to start somewhere, and maybe there's some uncertainty about other parts of the model that you do not want to focus on right now. And but I think there's no other way, or I think the modeling approach is not really doesn't give an answer to that question.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Claudia, you wanted to say something before I repeat the first question, or?
Yes, I wanted to pick up on what you are saying, because what I'm a bit confused about, Udo, sorry, is that every team models their inputs and their outputs, essentially. Then they need to marry up across different teams. But if other teams are having a different view or a different level of detail, you have got lots and lots of different vocabulary, different gaps, all sorts of ambiguities, all the problems that you get when engineers communicate with each other. You then transport them into a process model, because with traditional top-down modeling, or however you do it, you superimpose a single ontology over a process, but you kind of allowing this to bubble out from the individual tasks, and you could potentially run into serious incommensurabilities of the views that the individual parties have on the process, because that's what's reflected in communication problems.
Yeah, I think it might be useful to have some sort of governance framework around it, where you impose a common ontology where it's needed. I think it does not contradict this approach, but it makes generally it's easier to involve only those parties that are involved in an exchange of information in the agreement process of that. If you see that there are other teams or other parts of the process that might also benefit from that, then you can certainly extend that approach to involve all the parties that sort of work on probably a product that are somehow involved in the core components of the product where you do need a common ontology.
Okay, Udo, maybe it's just an additional layer to a process model. I mean, but that's maybe hard to follow for some of the new members in the special interest group. But we had a workshop on selecting appropriate process modeling approaches in the past, and we discussed whether all the entities necessary to describe a process model, or which elements or entities are required to describe a process model sufficiently. And we concluded that main shortcomings is due to the fact that we hardly can integrate all relevant entities in the same model. So we discussed that multiple views on a process have to exist in parallel, but they have to be consistent. And here the question is whether this would be an additional view, an additional layer with entities that are more emphasized in that particular view.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I'm not sure if this fits, but so this process modeling paradigm is independent of particular notations. So with control flow, we have notations like BPMN or UML, and it's actually possible to use these notations to implement this approach. So you might well use I mean that complex process model I've shown you. You can split it into several pools, into independent swim lanes, but you integrate communication between them instead of having control flow.
I agree. I mean, I think that's independent from the modeling approach, from the notation, but that's what we discussed last time. That in the end, it's about which entities you include in a model, and whether these entities can coexist in the same modeling approach. But I think that we are leaving the central discussion that we have today here. But I try to link back to with the first question. You focus on communication, and maybe Sabine and Alexander can also respond here. Doesn't the shift towards a more bottom-up leadership style also require a stronger focus on the communication in the team? So that was the link that I saw to the
yes
presentations before.
Yeah, that's right. So I think because you have the communication in this approach, so the messages, I think you can do that. And because what I observed in many of the other process models with control flow, there's a neglect of the data that are, or the data items that are exchanged between different participants. So I think it's a benefit if you have a way to represent this more explicitly.
Mm-hmm. Sabine, Alexander, do you have any thoughts on this, or?
Still thinking.
Okay, or anyone else in the group? I mean, we are more than only 4 people. But we already lost Eva. She had to leave the workshop already.
I think.
Okay. Yeah, Alexander.
I think one of the most important aspects that's maybe on the side here. I like the idea behind it, to really focus on the communication. But what I see in practice now is that we have a lot of ways of modeling something, but the question is it really going to be applied in practice? That's definitely one of the challenges I see. So I think to really have an additional hands-on example from practice would be really cool to see.
Yeah, so the approach here, I think, is useful for that. Because if you want your process model to be actually useful in practice to guide the work of the people, then one approach could be to let the participants in the process actively contribute to the modeling of the process. So rather than just receiving a process model that's been produced by someone else, you produce it yourself, and as it's expressed in a rather simple way, it's also quite easy to change it. Yeah. So I think there is an approach here that allows process models to become more usable for the operations that you actually want to guide.
I guess that's a very helpful thought, because what we experience is that people still are struggling with imagining the steps they actually do in the development process, where they are, how steps are interlinked, where they have interfaces, where they can change something maybe, or something would need to be changed. I think the awareness in thinking about modeling itself would be helpful for those involved. So.
Kilian, it might be time that we draw this to a conclusion.
I think it's time now. We have 40 minutes left, and we also wanted to advertise these upcoming elements of our workshop series. So, Claudia?
Well, thank you very much to Ulla, our speaker, for the fascinating and very reflective talk. I thought it worked extremely well, that really every talk contributed something. And I think it was very nice starting with Lisa's talk that was really looking at where the academic literature is. And it had these wonderfully clear models which were very clearly showing the advantages and disadvantages of things. And then we get an exposure to some of the reality of the big organizations from Sabine and Alexander, and we've just got this overwhelming complexity that we are trying to tackle with, and then Udo presenting a particular view on which to tackle this. And I think it's very interesting that we all have lenses, and we've got views on essentially trying to deal with this absolute complexity monster of a design process. And I think it's interesting how this is slowly emerging and shifting across new paradigms. And I often think about this, and then I think they are right. Yep, they are right. They're right as well. And then agree with everybody and think, yep, it's probably what complexity of a lot of systems is, that you've got multiple views and you can sort of poke the complex system and see it from different angles, but you never really getting on top of that. And I think it's interesting to see how the paradigms are shifting and how we probably need to bring these different lenses really together to try to combine things to enable the product development processes of the future. And I think what's interesting is that now it's also a reflection of the changes that we are seeing, that we have got different disciplines coming in. So agile has come in from computing, and a lot of the sort of logic, like what Sabine was describing, still comes from software. I do a software upgrade, I send it out, it's easy to install. But then almost as an afterthought, you talked about, and then the package comes with the new component that needs to get installed, and then the user has to try to deal with that. And you probably have similar issues at Webasto. And you also talked interestingly about different cultures needing to be incorporated, both academic cultures, discipline cultures, but also national cultures and languages. Like you were worried at Webasto that it would all work fine as long as it happened in Europe, but then it moved outside Europe, and And then it might get more complicated. And that's, of course, where I think that Udo's communication-based approach is also going to get a whole lot more complicated if you're trying to incorporate this communication and interaction across these different boundaries. So I think it will be very interesting to see how this is going to play out. And personally, I think what we need to engage with a lot more is how to think of processes at different levels of hierarchy, because you talk about this in very different levels. Like Sabine kept talking about flight level, which I sounded a bit scary from an aircraft controlling perspective, but it's an interesting angle of the levels of detail at which we look at things, how we break things down, and how we get things together at these different levels of description, and how we get something that gives us the agility, and yet we can be fairly sure that we've got some sense of completeness, because what we don't want is having gaps in our understanding, because the most wonderful agile process breaks down if there is just a pocket of the process that we've forgotten, and then problems arise from that. And then, as I was saying earlier to Sabine, the quality control processes kick in, and then everything becomes overly formal, and that would be completely counterproductive. So it's a fascinating area, and I have the feeling we have got a lot of work to do. So maybe, Kilian, you can talk about some of the first steps of doing it.
I think the first steps are already being done inside the community and also in industry. And I think currently are still in a phase where we can learn from each other, while maybe academia can provide some clarity and some generic explanations to the phenomena that we see in industry, while industry can feed us back some shades of reality that those models miss, and help us to test those explanations. And I think together we can move on and advance our knowledge, hopefully in the end resulting in contributions to practice. I think that's the ultimate goal here in this particular domain. And I think the workshop today was one step into that direction, and I would like to invite you to consider participating in the upcoming events that we are planning to do. We, as said in the beginning, today was just the beginning of this workshop series, and we aim to have longer workshops, 2 longer workshops. One will be organized by Markus Zimmermann and Jakob Trau from Technical University Munich in September, 15th and 16th of September in Munich. And the second workshop will be in January next year at IIS, in the Institute of Science in Bangalore in India, by Professor Srinivasan Venkataraman from IIT Delhi, and by Vishal and Amaresh Chakrabarti from IIS Bangalore jointly. So we have 2 opportunities to meet. We will have hopefully plenty of time, at least 1.5 or 2 days in each workshop. And what we aim to bring together as a community is our practitioners of today and researchers. And here we want to not just think about jointly advancing our knowledge, but to a certain extent try to anticipate the implications of current research results or research activities in our community. As we can see at the moment, we sometimes follow industry and try to explain what they are doing, what they face, the challenges they face, and sometimes try to explain why they are successful. I think that cannot be enough. I think we also have to consider, as the management paradigm in industry is currently changing, we might have to think ahead. What will be the next trigger? What will be the next thing that might require a change in the way we manage our projects, that we can better prepare for this? And here, I think in the end, we need an exchange between industry and academia, but rather looking ahead, looking into the future instead of explaining what we can see currently. In a way that depends on each other, but we would like to jointly think ahead how design processes of the future will be affected by new technologies, new design approaches, new management approaches, new methods. So the topics that our research is focused on now. So this is what we are seeking. We also hope that some industry participants will contribute similarly to today. The format will be that we invite short abstracts prior to the workshops, and we will have short presentations similar to today, followed by longer discussions. Today we had discussions after the workshop, of course, but during those workshops that we will hopefully organize on site, plus invited slots for hybrid presentations if it's not possible to join in person. We will have a social program where we can continue discussions in the evening, which is hopefully creating as much value as we experienced in the past. And after the workshops, after both workshops, we will invite selected contributions that we think fit well into the debate to produce a paper, a chapter for an edited book that we will aim to publish then in 2023. So the intended timelines are submission of the abstract for the first workshop by 1st of July and notification of acceptance shortly after. And for the second part in India, abstract of submission of the abstract at 1st of November, and creation of a full submission, depending on whether the contribution is invited in March after the both workshops. So if you're interested, please just reach out to Claudia or myself, and we hope you can answer questions. Sabine, Alexander, you are also invited. If you can, it's an opportunity or it's an option just to present and engage in the discussion if you think you do not have time to contribute to a chapter, which would be completely okay. I hope this becomes valuable for you and we have a lively discussion during those workshops.
Well, I would like to participate, but what I would think would be helpful if we would concretize or clarify a little bit also the research questions we want to tackle, so that we might contribute really, on point on those, and might also give those impulses from our side, which would be helpful. To
okay.
the discussion.
Okay. Of course, we have a more elaborate call for paper, but we still have to detail it a bit more. I think you're not the only one who is a bit lost, but we can also get start an exchange via email if you have other questions on more specific here.
Perfect.
Okay. It's 16:28. It was planned that we close at 4:30. So I think it's right time to thank you all for participating in this workshop. And I wish you a nice and insightful conference over the next days. And hope to, Alexander in a second, and hope that we will be able to meet again in person soon. So, Alexander?
Thank you. Because there was one question coming up, and I think that could be really, a nice topic for these further workshops. The one from Vivek. I mean, agility is all about transparency, but if you have the transparency and you have a lot of lessons learned, how can you really transfer that across teams? I mean, that's a very, very interesting question, which I would really like to pick up maybe in the next workshop. So just an idea.
Okay, thank you. So definitely worth it, but it was hard to address all questions in the time. As you have seen, we also already skipped the Miro board, so that exercise where we tried to or wanted to bring together all those ideas and questions. Okay, so I think we have possibilities where we can follow up and continue our discussions, and I would be glad if we can meet during one of those workshops.
Maybe just a final comment. I don't know whether we have a list of the participants of the workshop, so please get in touch with Kilian or me if you want to be put onto a mailing list for the activities of the special interest group and find out more about the workshops, because I'm not sure what record we have of this session here.
I will get a list. I already requested a list of participants.
We'll send it to you.
However, just let me know if you're interested in joining the next workshop and need more input or want to have presentations. And also for the speakers, please send me the data if you are able to share it, and so that I can forward up on a request. I would not make it publicly available, but up on a request.
Yeah, we'll get you the info. Okay, thank you everybody for participating. We'll meet you in virtual room 10 then.
Okay, bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.